When portraying actual locales, films tend to not be realistic. There's not much necessarily wrong with that. After all, it's usually because directors want the fitting location to reflect what the scene is trying to accomplish. So when an action scene jumps suddenly from Chicago to New York or from New York to Toronto, it's usually based on the desired buildings and streets they want to show, or their budgetary reasons. One section of the world that I've noticed tends not to be accurate with their geography is South America, especially when they have an action scene in the Amazon rainforest. Then things tend to get a little wonky. Take, for instance, Moonraker. With their globe-trotting, James Bond films are used to help showcase the world, and to go with the story, they'll have 007 go from place to place in a way that's not the least bit geographically accurate. In Moonraker, Bond travels to Rio de Janeiro and battles Jaws on the Sugarloaf Mountain cable cars, which, okay, fair enough. He then decides to make the trek up north to the Amazon River, and here's where things get really loopy. Bond takes a boat ride on the Amazon and somehow ends up at the Iguazu Falls. Geography lesson, everyone. Tell me, where are the Iguazu Falls? I'll wait. That's correct, hypothetical viewer. It's on the Brazil-Argentina-Paraguay border, or Triple Frontier as it's sometimes called. But that's not all. Somehow he ends up at the Mayan ruins in Guatemala. So Bond basically goes from here to up here to back down here and then up to Central America. I know Moonraker veered a lot more into science fiction than the other Bond films, but unless he somehow went through a Star Trek transporter or a portal from that video game, I find that trip a little hard to accomplish in the time it takes James Bond. We saw a similar leap in geography in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull during the chase sequence in the Amazon. I'm one of the film's few defenders, and I did not even mind Mutt Williams swinging with the monkeys, but I was too distracted by what happened shortly afterwards when Indy, Mary, and the others go from the Amazon rainforest over the Iguazu Falls. Who cares about Indiana Jones surviving a nuclear explosion in a fridge when we're seeing him defy actual geography? Remember that terrible Mr. Magoo movie with Leslie Nielsen? I've certainly tried to expunge it from my memory. One thing I certainly won't forget is a part of the film where Magoo travels to Rio de Janeiro and while escaping from the villains, somehow ends up at the, you guessed it, Iguazu Falls. The new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, Out of the Shadows, pulled the same stunt in the big fight scene between Bebop and Rocksteady on the Amazon River. When I saw they were heading towards a waterfall, I was counting down the seconds before they went down the Iguazu Falls. The crazy thing is, I do understand it. They're big waterfalls. Rio de Janeiro don't have them at that size. Ditto the Amazon. Aside from Moonraker, it really isn't that bothersome. But when you're even a little familiar with the geography of the land, and you see this happen time and time again, it starts to become pretty funny. Not that the confusing geography is limited to Hollywood productions. In the Brazilian romantic comedy Bossa Nova, every apartment building has a view of Sugarloaf Mountain and the Copacabana beaches. Unless that's somehow located on the same strip, I find that a tad impossible. Are there any major productions that do get the region's geography correct? Yes, and they are in fact the Rio films. When Carlos Saldanha started working on the first film, he sought to make it as geographically accurate to the real Rio de Janeiro as possible, despite being an animated film about talking birds. The Blue Sky animators traveled to Rio to research the city and capture the streets and locales accurately. The result was a film that was so accurate to the real city, some citizens even recognized their own street corner. And when Rio 2 shifted the setting to the Amazon, Saldanha similarly took a research trip to portray it correctly. And guess what? A certain waterfall never showed up. So that's right, the Rio films are more geographically accurate than the James Bond and Indiana Jones franchises. I hope you enjoyed this little geography lesson and this little peek behind the surprising location choices made by filmmakers. See you next time.